All right, so start with the governance of higher education. We'll just divide that up into internal governance and external governance. So the institution, the higher institution, governs itself usually through its board, and it governs the faculty, staff, and students. And there's also a level of external governance at the local, state, federal level that governs their behavior at the institution. So we'll see that at both levels. So let's talk about law and policy a little bit. So law has to do with the legal system, whether it's the uh, legislatures or court system. Policy has to do with maybe organizations and how they do administration and management, as well as maybe there might be some social science or physical science applications. So let's talk about internal law now. And that can be composed of things like institutional regulations and rules. It could also have to do with academic usage and customs, so things that maybe aren't written in paper, but they're customary academic things that happen at the institution. Also, as well as institutional contacts and contracts. And so you're dealing with folks that, obviously you have contracts with your faculty and staff, faculty contracts, staff contracts, and there are also external contracts. And so, there might be relationships that exist with vendors and things like that. And so all of those things impact the legal system. So in terms of external law, where does that come from? Well, obviously the U.S. Constitution in this case, in this country, federal constitutions outside the U.S., federal statutes. So there are laws that the Congress enacts. Then there are various administrative regulations that come from different government agencies. The states have their own constitutions, and their legislatures have various statutes, and some of the local level they might have ordinances. And then at the same time, and those come from the kind of the legislative groups in those areas. And then the agencies that exist at the state and local level can produce their own administrative regulations. There's also state common law that, again, is not necessarily codified in ordinances or regulations, but it does exist. So in terms of legal relationships in higher education, we'll start with the internal ones, and then we'll look at the most primary relationships. So that would be the relationships the board has with its officers, other board, board of trustees, things like that, board of regents, the relationship it has with the administrators of the institution as well as the staff. Then there's also a relationship the board has with faculty members and a relationship the board has with students. Some of the secondary relationships deal with how the officers, administrators, and staff interact with the faculty members, how the faculty members interact with the students, and how the officers, administrators, and staff interact with students. In terms of external relationships, the board has relationships with a variety of entities, including government agencies, education associations like accrediting bodies, also commercial entities. So a lot of, again, may have relationships with vendors and other affiliated entities, things like the American Association of University Professors, things like that. So there's a lot of other relationships the board may have. All right, again, let's kind of delve into the distinction between law and policy. So the authors of the textbook, they look at laws dealing with the legal system, so the legislatures and the court system. Policy deals with things like management and administration, social sciences, physical sciences, other disciplines. So there may be other things that kind of come into designing the policy that have to be considered. There are also going to be, in terms of regulation Again, you'll see statutes that come from the various legislatures, and that's usually the legislative branch. And then your executive branch, you'll have different agencies, and they'll come out with administrative regulations. And also in the court system, sometimes you'll have cases that set a precedent. So if there's a ruling, that ruling, even though it's technically not a law, it sets a precedent for how individuals act in a way that is quote unquote legal.